So as you heard, the meeting will be recorded. So welcome everybody. Today with Antoinette, we'll go through this workshop, which is about from learning creation to learning curation. Basically, what we will see is all the steps for successful learning content curation. And just to make sure, let me know if you see the screen. I think it should be okay, but just to make sure. So let me introduce myself first. I'm Loic. I'm a learning curator at Myskillcamp. So basically what I do at Myskillcamp is to guide and support our customers to find the right piece of content and to help them to build meaningful learning path for their learners. I'm with Antoinette today. Antoinette, the floor is yours.
Hi everyone, welcome to this webinar. I'm Antoinette and I'm Digital Learning Manager at Myskillcamp. And I'm supporting our customers to have, I would say, meaningful learning experience with our platform and make sure that we together engage your learners successfully.
Thanks, Antoinette. And then we introduce ourselves with Antoinette, but what about you guys? Can you let us know, maybe in a chat, where are you from? And also in which company are you working and what do you do as a position? It would be really interesting for us so that we can maybe focus on some specific aspect. So if you can use the chat just to let us know, where are you from? What do you do? And in which type of organization as well? Okay, let's continue anyway, but okay, I'm starting at, okay, customer care Euro. Thanks, Olivia. I will check out the answers anyway, so feel free to post it. So what we'll cover today, it's three things. So we hope after following this workshop, you will be able to do three things. The first one is to explain what is learning curation and why it's important. So basically the benefits of the learning curation. The second one would be to understand the key success factors of a learning curation project. And finally, to understand and follow all the steps for successful learning curation. And also to understand what we do at Myskillcamp in terms of learning curation. So let's start our journey with understanding what is learning curation. So obviously we cannot show of hands, but if you can tell us in the chat who has already spent more than 20 minutes to find a TV show or a movie on Netflix. Because I do, and I do all the time. So if you can just let us know in the chat with yes or no, if it already happens to you. Yeah, yes, Olivia said yes. Alicia as well, Sarah as well. And I saw that Antoinette raised her hands as well. And I think we are kind of all in the same situation. And actually we lost a lot of time to find the right piece. Okay, Tina, thanks. Only when you involve your 13 years old in the choice. Otherwise it goes faster. So we actually lose a lot of time to find the right piece of content, and whether it's for entertainment, so it's a movie or a TV show on Netflix, but also for learning, actually, we are losing a lot of time to find the best content. And actually, when you found content that looks great, you never know that the content would meet actually your needs in terms of learning and developing your skills. So it's really hard actually to know. And actually, that's totally normal. And that actually this image represents me really well because I'm kind of overwhelmed by all the content, all the documentaries, all the articles, all the learnings I have to follow, to watch, to listen and stuff. So I'm kind of, I have this list of things I have to watch, read and stuff, which is kind of super big. And that's where curation comes in place. So if you can tell us by the chat, thanks to the chat, if you already know what curation means. If you can tell us yes or no. Antoinette, you do know what curation means. Exactly. More or less for Olivia. Okay, right. Perfect. Then I hope you will find out a lot of things. Tina asked if it's like creating content. Not quite. Actually, I would even say it's kind of the opposite of creating content. But that's perfect, Sina, because I hope you will learn a lot of things here. Okay, so let's say more or less. Perfect. So I will start first of all by defining what is learning curation. And Kim, you got it right. It's actually, as you said, Kim, to collect and to put together a lot of content and share the most interesting contents. So it can be quite a lot of different type of content. So it can be video, infographics, games, images, text, articles, anything. And it's related to one specific topic. And just so you know, guys, actually curation comes from the museum and the cultural industry, if I can say. And basically the curator, so the person in charge of curation, was kind of the keeper of a cultural legacy. He was actually responsible for gathering and organizing different pieces of art from the same collection and to spread it and to share it to the public. And thanks to the web, to internet, when internet came along, nowadays everybody does curation. Like when you read an article and you share it on social media, it's kind of curation as well. When you show a video to your friend, it's kind of curation as well. And when you suggest a friend to watch a specific movie on a streaming platform, it's also kind of curation, because you will kind of find the right piece of content for targeted audience. Even though this audience is quite small, it's still kind of part of the curation process. And actually, our customers use curation for three main reasons. For learning reasons, obviously, but the first one is to select the content like a menu. So basically, as I said, we are all overwhelmed by the content. So having this kind of curated content help us to have only the best content and only the one the learners really need. The second one is in the learning and development. You usually have the business model, which is pay per catalog. So you have to buy a whole catalog of providers to have access to only few topics that are really interesting. So here with the curation, you only actually pay for what you actually need and what your learner need. So depending on your learning priorities. And the third reason is to improve learners' engagement. And why? Because the learner paths have been created by only the top of the content, the best in class content. So basically you will help your learners to remain engaged with it. I have another question for you. I think it will be my last one. So according to you, how much is the creation of a digital learning course? A, between 1,000 and 10,000 euros, B, between 10,000 and 50,000 euros, or C, between 50,000 and 100,000 euros. According to you, how much costs the development of a digital learning course? Whether it's A, whether it's B, or whether it's C. You can put it in the chat. Gianfranco said, I hope that is A. To be honest, I would hope as well, but be prepared for the bad news though. Okay, no more no more waiting for that. The right answer was B, between 10,000 and 50,000 euros. Like it's obviously in general because it depends. It depends obviously on the kind of course we want to develop, with how many interactions we want to put on and stuff, how many content, how long it will last and stuff. And I definitely agree with you. We are in the wrong job and we should be on the other way. But anyway, it costs a lot of money, but also it costs a lot of time, a lot of energy as well, and it requires a lot of skills to build and create a strong and impactful learning experience. And mostly because everything is changing so fast these days. So basically, it's really hard to have something that is still relevant and still up to date in terms of training, or otherwise you would have to create and create and create over and over. But fortunately, thanks to curation, it's not necessary to create, because as I said, curation is all about catching the right piece of content, putting all together to build meaningful learning experiences. Now that I think, and I hope that you understood like what is curation and why it's so important, we'll see how to actually manage a learning curation project. And Antoinette will start off with the first step of the process.
Yes, thank you, Loic. So indeed, it's important to actually think about your learning project as a project. And this is why we have a learning curation process in place to make sure you will reach your objectives. So first, the first step is obviously to identify the target audience. So who are your learner personas? Because I think you all know that we are learning different way. I prefer actually videos than reading articles. It's more impactful for me. And I'm sure you all have your own learning, I would say, preferences, habits, etc. So this is why, as a first step, it's important to identify your audience. So why actually, why is it actually so a need to identify the persona and your learning audience? Because you will identify the needs of your learning audience, the habits, the learning habits they have, the preferences, and really they, how they are actually on a day-to-day basis, how they are learning. And you will, based on those information, you will be more able to choose the appropriate activities, tools, technologies, formats, etc. Of your learning content. So you will curate the content on a more meaningful way to make sure that you will actually meet the needs and answer to the habits and preferences of your audience. And also when you're in a design project of learning here, it's you are maybe with a team, you are creating this program with a team, and it will actually give you the focus. Okay, so if you have to take some decision regarding your learning program, it will always give you this focus, because you have the target audience that you need to satisfy, you have the needs, you have the habits, and so it will help you to take some decision. And of course, it will help you to make sure that you deliver a learning experience which is meaningful for your audience, because it's it's really an empathy map that you will actually build. You will map all those information. You will map all those information, and it will ensure actually this experience, because learning, it's not only about the format or about the content, it's also about the experience that you will deliver. So the next step is also very key. It's to make sure that you have identify and define the objectives of your learning program. And actually at Myskillcamp, we identified, but it's not a secret, I think Arthur did also, but we identify four different levels of objectives. The first one is related, it's more strategic, is related to the company, at a company level. So Loic, you can move to the next slide. So it's okay, why do I need to create this learning program? What is the purpose behind for my company? What are the stakes of the company? And also it will ensure that you will assess actually the learning program at the end. You will make sure that you reach this objective. You will be able to identify and measure the impact. Then you have the second level. Loic, you can move forward. This is the operational level. So it's more regarding the environment directly of the learner. So what is the impact for the learner in its environment? So it will also help you to define some KPIs that you will track after the training program. Then you have the third level, which is the general level. So here it's directly related to the training course. And so, okay, you have to think, when you create this learning program, what should the learners be able to do? What is the capability they need to have, the skills, and it's really related to action verb. okay? And again, it will help you to ensure that you validate the skills at the end of this learning program. So how you will assess the skills acquired. And then you have the fourth level, which is more related to the activities you will add in this program. And so after following each module, what should the learners be able to do? Those questions are really important, and they will drive actually the building of your program. And what we do is that we actually create those objectives based on the Bloom taxonomy, which is very helpful to structure your objective, because this Bloom taxonomy is using some verb of action, and it will give you really the insights to identify those objectives. And then I give the floor to Loïc.
Thanks, Antoinette. So based on the targets and based on the objectives you've just defined, you will define what is called the minimum criteria. So it's basically asking you basic questions, but who are really key to ask in terms of curation. The first one would be to understand in which languages you want to train your learners. Because depending on whether you want to train all of them in English, or if you want to train all of them in English, French, German, you would have access to different type of content. So it's something you really need to ask yourself, because it will depend as well on the learning objective, depending on the language and stuff. So you have to be aware of that. Then in terms of content format, so as Antoinette said, we learn all in different ways. So what kind of content my learners would be more likely to like and to be engaged with? Is it more than videos? It is more articles, more games and stuff. Then you have the duration. Whether, a duration which is too short, like you would basically give too low information to your learners, so they might crave for more. Well, if it's too long, they might be bored as well. So you have to ask this question, and you have to define it, even though you won't follow all these duration aspects like strictly. Like you have to be aware of what kind of like how much you want to dive into the topic. Then you can ask yourself as well if you want any piece of content or any providers, like for instance Coursera, Open Classroom and stuff that you want to use mandatory, and what kind of key messages. So it's really related to the objectives and mostly the pedagogical one and the general one as well, you know. Once you define like targets, the objectives and the needs, you would go to define the structure, which is really key. Here, guys, I cannot give you like a way to structure it, because it depends on what you defined earlier. So depending on your objective, depending on your target and stuff, I just can give you what we do most of the time at Myskillcamp. And what we do is we go, we break down a learning path in 4 different modules. The first one would be an inspiring module, where we give the why of the learning. So why you should follow this learning, why is it important to be, for instance, in case of a leadership training, why it's important to be a leader and stuff. So it's really to give the motivation to the learner to keep going the learning experience. So basically, if I give you an example, guys, here it would be like just in terms of leadership training, you would put, for instance, the famous TED talk of Simon Sinek about the golden circle, which I think is great when it comes to leadership. So that's for the inspiring module. Then you would go to the explaining, which is more about explaining the different concepts and the main messages of the learning. So here, for instance, in terms of stress management, you would put, for instance, something to understand the consequences and the reasons of the causes of the stress, like where does it come from and stuff, that the learner has more background about it. Then you would move on to the learner would move on to the doing part, where it's more about good practices, tips, advices regarding the topic. So for instance, in terms of stress management, it can be, which is really great, I think, an infographic where you can actually have some good practices in terms of stress management. So for instance, taking breaks, try to meditate and stuff like that. And finally, you will finish by diving deep, where basically the learner would have the possibility either to like dive into one concept that has been introduced into the learning, or either find out kind of something related to the learning. So it can be, for instance, in terms of stress management, it can be a module about emotional intelligence, since a lot of stress comes from our interaction with others. So that's basically how we break down the learning path at Myskillcamp. So starting with inspiring content, explaining content, doing content, and then diving deep content. And all of this is breakdown between learning activities. So just to learners have to go through quizzes, project and stuff in order to have to make sure that the engagement level is high and the learner is still like, we make sure that the retention level is high as well, you know. And then once you define the structure, you have to find the content. No secret, you just have to go for it. You have to search, you have to find the right piece of content. I can give you obviously the basic one, which are TED Talks, which are great. YouTube as well have a lot of great content. Articles and blogs from experts. For instance, if you would go for collaborative work, you can go for the blog of Miro, for instance, which is a tool about collaboration. You can go for podcasts as well. There are a lot of great content out there. And also, one I really like is CatCat. The name is funny, but the website is great. It's free, and it's basically a community of curators. So when you go there, you can basically have access to a lot of already curated content, depending on what you need. So for instance, there are a lot of curated content about, let's say, business, human resources, communication, soft skills, leadership. So the website and the community is really great because the content is like great and you already have structure. So if you want to start curation, but you don't know where to start, I think going to CatCat can be a good way to be kind of inspired. Since once you find the content, you have to assess it because you will find a lot of content, but not all of those are great. And for that, we have 8 criteria to assess a piece of content at Myskillcamp. The first one is the relevance. So basically you have to ask this question, like, does the content was relevant and is it still up to date? For that, I have a clear example. If you go for a learning path about remote management or remote working, do you really want to take content that is before the COVID situation, since a lot of things have changed since then? So here, this content won't be that much relevant because a lot of things have changed since. The second criteria would be application. So basically, does the content is applicable to the daily job of the learners? Is it something like you can use in this job? The third criteria is the duration. As I said, does the content have a sufficient duration, like not too short and not too long? You have to find the right balance. One which is really important is the fourth one, the learning objectives. You define the learning objectives in the second step. So here it's all about, does the content help to complete the learning objectives defined before? So you have to be aware of that because not all the content you would find would help you to define the learning objectives. Then you have ease of use, like, is the content easy to use? Like, is it accessible easily for the learners and stuff? Not too much button to click and stuff. In terms of diversity, like, does the content have enough variety in terms of format and stuff? In terms of activities, like, I think there's nothing worse than some questions we might face when we do a learning or training online, that the questions are not appropriate. Sometimes like, the difficulty is too high or the difficulty is too low. It's not challenging enough. And sometimes like learners are right, but the question in the way it's spelled, like it seems wrong. So you have to be careful of that. And then you have the playfulness. So if the content was fun and enjoyable, because it's really important to think about this gamification aspect, because something that is fun, the learner would come back to it and would be much more engaged with it, you know? Then you have the best content, but you have to put it together and like so that it makes sense. And for that, we have a checklist. So the first aspect of this checklist is first, the content should repeat itself, it should repeat the key messages, but it shouldn't be duplicated, because you want to have the same content in terms of like, you have the same key messages, but it should be delivered in a different way, with different explanation, with different examples as well, because we don't want the learner to go over the content 4 times, for instance. We want the learner to go over the same key messages 4 times, so that he can really understand it, but not the same kind of content. It's something to look at. The second one is the content is not contradictory, and it is very important. And I would give an example. So basically, in terms of product management, you have different process and methodologies. You want to make sure that in the first module, you don't talk about agile methodologies, and in the second one, you talk about the waterfall methodology, because it might get the learner kind of confused. So you have to be really aware of that and make sure that all the contents are relevant all together and make sense. Then you can get a look at the format as well, so to make sure that they are diversified, so you can kind of the format relates to every learner. And then the content and format are good quality, and of course I can give you the example of the criteria we've just been through. The content can be used legally, because sometimes you cannot choose every content you want, so you have to be aware of that as well. And finally, mostly on YouTube, for instance, sometimes the content feature really a lot of ads, so you have to be careful of that. Like, don't take content that are displaying a lot of advertisement and stuff, because otherwise it will kind of break the learning aspect of the learning experience. It will kind of reduce it, so be aware of that as well. And finally, the last step, which is communication, and Antoinette will take over for this part.
Thank you, Loic. Indeed, this is important. I mean, you will have designed a beautiful learning program and with really good curated content. But if you don't promote your learning program internally, it's a shame, because obviously people won't do it. So this is why it's important to, of course, based on your learning objectives, if this is mandatory, the way you will communicate to the learners will be different. But if this is something that you want to promote to anyone within the company, don't hesitate to use the communication channel that you have in your company. So it's also important if you have a really key learning path with curated content that you have designed, if it's key for your audience, to actually introduce it with a business sponsor through a kickoff meeting, where you will promote the why, what's in it for me actually for the learners, and explain also the navigation, because usually what we see is that they don't actually have all the skills to navigate appropriately on the LMS, if you do have one. So this is important also to give all the capabilities to the learners to go through this learning program. And so you have several ways to promote it. Could be newsletter, intranet, social learning sessions, or it could be also a CEO testimonial. So don't hesitate, if it's key for your organization, to use all the possibilities of communication that you have.
Thanks, Antoinette. And regarding the successful of a learning curation project, I would like to end on this one, which are the key skills for learning curation. The first one is all about curiosity. So it's all about asking the right questions and working with experts in order to understand what is the need in terms of curation. So you have to be really curious, and basically doing curation, you have to be like really curious about a lot of different topics, because you won't only do curation on one dedicated topic. So that's one thing to take into account. Then the second skill is all about pedagogy, obviously, because we're working, I mean, it's all about making the information more simple, understandable, and consistent, and you also have to have a kind of critical eye on content, whether it's a good learning content or not. So you have to be really aware of that. And finally, the last skills is all about digital. So it's all about using the digital tools. It's a learning curator would spend a lot of time on digital tools to find the right piece of content and stuff. And also understanding the user behaviors on digital channels in order to know which content would fit much more in terms of digital learning, you know, because not all of them would be a good fit when it comes to digital learning experiences. Once we've seen all the kind of steps we should follow in terms of if we want to achieve a successful learning curation project. So now let me give you a bit of details of what we do at Myskillcamp in terms of inspiration when it comes to learning curation. The first thing you should know, guys, is that we are working with more than 20 partners covering a lot of different topics, whether it's like marketing, project management, soft skills, office software, computing. We also have some stuff in compliance and safety. We are working with different providers, like you probably know them already: Coursera, Bookboon, Open Classroom, LinkedIn Learning, Good Habits, Udemy, and a lot of them. We are working with them to build convenient learning experience. So we don't rely only on free content, but also on content that are really well built and also proven as well. And we try to build like kind of collection off the shelf. So we design for the moment few collections. So whether it's soft skills, management and leadership, project and innovation, business, languages, safety and conformity, security, but also one I especially like, which is key skills for 2030. And behind this collection, we are mixing free content, but also content from our providers. And for instance, behind the collection soft skills, you might find a lot of different learning paths, which are, for instance, how to manage conflict at work, how to better manage your time and your priorities, how to remote work, and what are the best practices. Learn how to learn, which is a really key skill. What are the key to assertiveness, and how to deal with stress. So behind the kind of the collection, you have all this access to this learning path. It goes into much details into these topics. And just to give you a bit of demo, guys, here on the platform, it's a learning path about time management. So as you can see, we have a video which is inspiration with a learning activity, which is a project. Then you have a module about explanation, which is a TED talk about gain control over your free time. And obviously you have a lot of activities with feedback for the learners. So whether it's quizzes or project and stuff. So here you can see how it can actually works on the platform with a lot of different kind of content, videos, games, and quizzes and stuff like that. So that's how we work at Myskillcamp when we build a learning path. But that's not all, because not only we have the collection of the shelf, but we also work and support customers with their learning curation approach. So what we do here is basically we can give trainings about learning curation, so they can do it by themselves. We can also give kind of workshop, and also we can support them and co-create learning path depending on their learning strategy. So we kind of work together to achieve their goals for that. So for instance, if you have a specific need regarding a learning path, we can work together to make it possible to build this specific learning path with content from free providers, but also from paid providers. And I would like to finish this webinar before we start with the questions. And I hope, guys, you would have a lot, and feel free to start typing them in the chat, or to take to open your mic if you have any question. But Kelly Palmer, who worked for LinkedIn in the past and who is currently the Chief Learning and Talent Officer at Degreed, said that there's a lot of amazing content out there. And if you have precious resources in terms of money, energies, or even time, one way to think about your learning strategy is only creating the content that no one else can create. And I think that's so true. Like you don't have to create everything from scratch when there's already existing content that are really great already. So guys, just so you know, we also write a white paper with ELD, which is one of our partners, about learning curation. So I let you kind of take off your smartphone and take the QR code, so you can download it for free. The white paper is really great because it will help you to really, the webinar was more about awareness about learning curation, but the white paper would help you to understand much better what is learning curation and what are the first steps you should take in order to make it real, kind of. So feel free to scan it, the QR code, and then you can download the white paper for free, guys. Do you have any question? Like, did you know, guys, learning curation before? Do you have any topics that you want to cover in the future? Do you want to implement learning curation into your learning strategy as well? And if you have any question and any things you didn't understand, like, feel free to ask, to open your mic, guys.
You were very clear, Loike. Thank you.
Thanks, Tina. And
we will send you this presentation after the webinar, and also so you will find again the pictogram to scan the white paper.
Yeah. And Tina, because I'm Angus, and I don't know if you work in the HR department and learning development department, but have you thought about doing curation instead of creation? Sorry, curation instead of creation in your learning strategy before? Or, I mean, do you want to do it now? Or I would be really glad to have your feedback on that. Okay, great. If you want, we can also send some materials about it, which can help you to understand maybe a bit more. And perfect. I hope it answers your question, or at least it raises more questions, because that's where you can kind of get your project kind of like ask you the right questions. So I hope. Okay, perfect. Perfect, Tina. That's really interesting. And if you ever want to talk about it, feel free to reach us. I will put my email address here. I mean, I will display it on the screen as well, and the one of Antoinette.
I think if we send the presentation at the end, our contact information are in there.
Yeah, definitely. So feel free to reach us if you want to talk about it, if you want to go through. I think we would be glad to discuss about it. Any question for us, like things you want us to go through again, or?
I think it seems to be clear for everyone.
Yeah.
Nice. Don't hesitate to send us your feedback after this webinar, and we will